Thanks everyone for tuning in to the second installment of our Making the Switch webinar series. We're talking about making a successful tool migration to new digital platforms. If you work really in any sort of job that faces the public in any way, chances are you're communicating, fundraising, you're doing some sort of work with folks in a digital capacity, and likely as your organization grows and changes over time, you need to change platforms. We were just talking about moving to new houses. And sometimes it's great. Oh, good. Thank you, John. You're safe. I'm glad to hear that. The fires in California are cray, and we've got our share already going in Colorado. So I feel you, and hope you and yours also stay safe. I'm Jen Frazier. I am the president and founder of Firefly Partners. We're a digital agency working with nonprofits and social causes since 2007, social good. And before that, I was working at a nonprofit and volunteering in nonprofits since I've been in high school. So definitely been working in this sector for, I'm not going to date myself. Oh, wait, a long, long time. Since high school. So thanks for joining us. Today, we're in phase 2 of the tool migration. So last time we talked about what do you need to do in your organization to get ready to make a big platform move. Now we're going to talk about, you've kind of gotten your ducks in a row. You've talked through some things. You've talked to your team. You've figured out a little bit more specifically about what things are getting in your way as you're thinking about your effective communication with your supporters, your donors, your advocates, and things are maybe getting in your way or things aren't functioning the way you want them to, and you've identified that. So now we're gonna talk about what it means to find, evaluate, and actually go through the selection process. What's that look like? And then we'll talk about what it takes to actually get moved onto those new tools. So we're gonna talk a little bit about, again, getting ready to think about what those demos are going to look like. I know, again, a lot of people, it's like going to open houses in your, in your town and be like, I just want to walk through because I like to look at how houses are laid out, and I like to look at floor plans and see what people have decorated, what kind of kooky decorations people have. But I'm kind of just like willy-nilly walking through places. Try not to do that when you're looking at demos of tools. You want to be a little bit more specific, be more planful. You want to have a set agenda. You want to know what you're looking for. Don't want to waste anybody's time. And then you want to get that straight before you even start doing the demos. Then the demos are a whole science in of themselves. We'll talk about that. And then really kind of narrowing down and finding that best fit. And then negotiating contracts like a pro. What's that look like before you actually get able to move into your new house? What does that look like? So those are our 3 topics for today. So really, you're still kind of in prep mode. We're like, okay, we prep, so we're ready to move forward. You're still going to do a little bit more prepping. I think we found with our organizations, the big one too, is to sort of take a deep breath and do just an overarching sort of mission statement almost for this process. It really helps level set with the platforms you're going to be communicating with. So they just at a glance can say, what are we doing? What are our outcomes? What are we driving toward? What are the high level main objectives we're shooting for? It also just makes sure that the whole team is actually in agreement. Sometimes you're like, no, I thought we were replacing an advocacy tool. No, we're replacing a fundraising tool. No, wait. And then even though you've kind of been talking to all the different departments, it's really important to kind of come back together and have that overarching, like, okay, what are we doing? This is what we're doing. We're looking for a platform that can replace these core functionalities for our team, and really the why we're going to replace these tools so that we can communicate more effectively, do smarter segmentations. We're going to increase our ability to automate lots of processes. We're going to be able to do better integrations, like really be clear again, even just encapsulate that pretty quickly. So that's a component of one of the things you're going to do to prep. We've got a few pieces. So your kind of why statement. Again, this is for you and your vendors so that they know at a glance which tools are changing and your priorities. And then this is a biggie. So we're gonna spend a little time here talking about this and what this means. So you went around to all your departments in phase one and you said, okay, what do you guys need? What's lacking? What's going to make your life a lot easier? What's going to make your communication with your kind of part of our constituency go more smoothly? What can we do over here? And you've kind of pulled all these things together. What we want to do now is sort of pull into what we call a functional requirements matrix at Firefly. And it's basically just a glorified spreadsheet. And that has several different things in the rows and several different things, in the rows and several different things in the columns. And so what you're going to do is separate out along the rows the functional area needs that you have. So you're going to have a section that's going to be like, okay, here's what I need out of an email tool. Get pretty specific. Think about what you need, what's not working well. I need better segmentations. I need, in my email platform, I need automatic responders. I need follow-on. I need journeys. I need marketing automations. I need all these different things. Get into the weeds a little bit about what you're looking for in each area. So if it's fundraising, email marketing, if it's peer-to-peer, and then don't forget sort of those larger administrative needs. What else do I need? I need really granular user permissions. I need the ability, at a high level to say, I do need the multi-currency, multi-language on forms. I need, these types of things that are sort of universal across the platform, across those different functional areas. List those out and group them in chunks. Or if somebody's really gung-ho, you can do it in tabs, but I like to do it just in one long list of rows on your spreadsheet. That's your row. And the tabs going across the top, you're going to have columns that are first for then your larger team to come back in and really get in the weeds of this piece of functionality is a must-have. Like I have to have it. I can't live without it. I really wouldn't move to a platform if it didn't have X. And then the nice to have, it would be really awesome. Like it'd be really, really great if we could have this, but it's not a deal breaker. And then you have sort of those like, gosh, this is a little bit of pie in the sky. I don't even know if e-tools can do this, but God, it would be great if it could also wash my dishes. It'd be super if it would give me a back rub at the end of the day. That'd be super. It'd be really cool if it could tag things in a certain way. It'd be great if it could give me, really great insights into user behavior. It would be great if it could, do some of these other things that might be not at the core of what you really need to do your work effectively, but sort of these kind of further away from the must-have. Nice. Oh, that'd be beautiful. And I would be thrilled if I could find a tool that could do these things. So those are your three for your team. So what you do is you fill out all your rows, all the functional areas, and then you send it around, or if you're on your game right now, you create a Google Sheet or a shared Excel document or something like that where you can collaborate, and you send it out to those various stakeholders that you've identified in the first phase. Who gets to weigh in on where this lists on a priorities list? Where does it fall? Is this a must-have? Is it a nice-to-have? Is it a wish list? Around those functional areas, you gave your team a little while, a couple of weeks, whatever, to fill that out and really make sure that you've designated, and people can just either put their initials, they can add several checks in the box. Yes, this is a must-have around this, so that you can get a good sense across your whole organization, not just a team, where that priority lands for that piece of functionality. And then what you're going to do is add beyond that, you're going to have columns that are then going to be filled in by your various tool folks. The vendors are then going to see your areas of functionality and the kind of level of importance that it has for your organization. And they're going to let you know at a glance, my platform does this out of the box. It's native into the platform. Got it. Nailed it. And that's why it's good to get specific. If you say, I need email marketing. Well, like almost every tool will be, yes, you need to be more specific than that. Does it, what level of automation? How intense do the user flows go? What does my drip campaign look like? Can I do, several twists and turns in my workflow tree, like what happens in there. So you want them to answer out of the box, got it, or yeah, you can do that, but it takes either a little bit of manual, or there's some tweaks you have to do. You maybe have to get the data here and you need to move it there, but definitely possible. And then on the roadmap, we don't currently have it, but we've already planned for it. And if they can't give you one of those three, then you know that it's something they've never even really dreamed of yet. So that's also good to know, that they would be like, oh, it's not even on the roadmap. Don't have it in any way, and it's not on the roadmap. Critical. So getting this sort of big requirements matrix down is a critical step in the process as you're, again, gathering your information around for your team and to prepare for scheduling some of these demos. So then you take a look at this and you go, okay, have we captured everything? Obviously, those columns for the vendors are going to stay blank for a while, but we want to make sure that all these other columns are filled in and everybody feels good about it and you're ready to move into the next phase. So the last thing you want to do is you think about kind of that early prep. This is why I said, like, sometimes you'll just sit in on demos for tools, and they run their demos how they want to run them. They've got an agenda. They go through this part of the platform. They move through the user record, then they go into the email, then they go over to the fundraising or whatever. And you're just following along, and it's great. But if you're driving, this is your demo. You need to help them, A, highlight the things you want to see, and B, go in an order that helps you sort of take these demos one after the other and start to, do some rhyme or reason between them and help you sort of go, oh, right, when I saw this in the last call, they were showing me this level of detail in the user record. And now I'm looking at a similar time and it's coming at the same flow in the call. It'll just help your brain organize the information that's coming at you a little bit more succinctly, a little more carefully for you. You want to throw in some of these use cases, user scenarios you've got, again, that we kind of helped you cull together in phase one. What are the situations that you've come up against that have proved difficult, challenging for your team? Make sure you put those into where do you want to see that? Okay, we were talking about the marketing automation piece of your tool. Great. My use case is I want to be able to see when I send out this message, they go into this drip campaign and they get this user journey and that flow. I want you to show me how you set that up in this platform, because how you set it up in the platforms is different from one to the next. And it sometimes can be a lot easier, more user intuitive. Others can be a little more taxing. So just make sure you blend that in to that script. Call out those user scenarios that we went through in phase one in your script. And then you're sort of like, okay, great, this is how we're going to do it. And now I'm ready to sort of go, great, we've prepped for the last time. And now I'm ready to go out and look for my tools. So obviously there are thousands of these digital platforms out there. How do you even know which one, where to start? Obviously, our Making the Switch guide and other things like that exist. Other platforms that do a lot of tool comparisons are good to look at. You can obviously use your good old Google. The other things is obviously a lot of your friends in the space, other nonprofits, a trusted agency that you already work with, maybe on a different type of project, can help weigh in. But you'll start poking around and looking at some of these. You'll start looking at their sites, kind of look at what they have in terms of their functionality at a glance. Your self-tour of their websites. And you start to make a list, depending on what you're looking for. If you're kind of just looking for a new email marketing platform, your list is going to get pretty long. It's going to start to be like, okay, there's a lot that at a glance can maybe seemingly meet my requirements. That's okay. Again, you're going to go back to those. These are the most critical though. I really need to know, does it do X, Y, and Z? It seems like it can, not sure. That's okay. Put it on your initial list. Just sort of start cataloging what's going to work. The big piece here is integrations. what does it integrate with? Is it going to work inside my ecosystem, my existing tools? Is this going to fit in well? I don't really want to buy a bunch of new tools that are going to be off in silos. So even though it's like the sweetest platform ever, if it doesn't integrate well, am I just kind of creating more work for myself down the road? Again, leaning on your partners, friends in the space, folks who've just gone through a platform. I know a lot of these, we've got these like group of peer-to-peer clients and their friends, and they're like, we're waiting for them to move. And then once they move and they go through that, when they land, I'm going to come back and hear their lessons learned and their kind of horror stories or success stories or whatever. And then I'm going to learn from that. Absolutely. Obviously, this is not like a strange territory. Lots of folks are going through this right now, and people go through it all the time. So just ask around, start to compile that list. So what you're going to do is you've done your sort of self tour and you've gathered these best tools. You're going to send that full requirements matrix to each of those people. And I recommend try not to send it to more than 10 tools, because then that's all going to start to cross in your brain. That initial sending, like you're just going to send the requirements matrix and say, help me understand where your tools land on this matrix. Must, out of the box, a little bit of workarounds on my roadmap, or you're the first person I've ever heard ask me for this kind of functionality. Don't know. Have to talk to my developers, those kinds of things. And give them, a couple weeks, pull them all back in, and then you're going to look, say what happened, and just let people know. We're going to do a quick, initial eval. We're going to schedule follow-on calls. Let those vendors know that you're not just, teasing them, but like let them know that you're trying to do at least a first round of vetting without having to go through many rounds of demos. So you'll look at these returned requirements matrices. So they're obviously evaluating and rating their own tools. Once you can see how that stacks up against your must-have, nice-to-have wish list, it's highly likely that some will fall away really fast. No, they don't even have our top. It looked like they did on their website, but now that we're getting into the weeds and really getting a little more specific, it's very clear now that they can't even do some of these core pieces. So some will fall away, and it may be that some, really rise to the top, or could be one that just is like, oh, this stands out, great. You still want to go through the next steps. We're going to talk about even if you have one that's a very clear winner, just go through the diligence, make them work for it a little bit, make sure that your team is happy, even though it looks like it on paper. Because you might find that sometimes a vendor will say that it can do it, and then you actually really dig into the weeds. That what they consider to be a workaround is sometimes not what you consider to be a workaround as well. So just keep going. And sometimes you also just have a little bit of a clarity moment with your team saying, maybe we have too many things that are must have, like, we're maybe being, too picky. Try to stick to your list of critical requirements though. I haven't seen anybody not be able to find a platform that gets pretty darn close. And then you want to kind of cull and narrow this list of, like, say you sent it to 10, you get it back, and now you're thinking about how many rounds of demos do I want to sit on? I highly recommend if you can get it down to 4 or less. That's going to make your and your team's life a lot easier when you now go into the next step of the demo.
Jen, real quick.
Yeah.
We have a question from Liz Walsh. I'm going to unmute you, Liz, so you can ask your question.
Awesome. Hey, Liz.
Hey, Jen. Liz here at Human Rights Watch. We had so much fun in the past in person.
I know.
So yeah, I'm super intrigued by. I was on session 1 and now on session 2, and thank you so much. I'm sure the entire audience is like getting so much from your insight. So thank you. My question is, we always hear the word request for proposal, like the RFP. And right now you were talking about, the matrix or matrices. I guess in your eyes, is it one and the same, or do you see them as kind of separate? Like the matrix is one thing that we could just send and that's all that needs to be sent, or the matrix rolls into an RFP?
That's a great question. I have lots of people who don't want to do this like big laborious RFP process. And I know from both the organization side and from the vendor side, and I'll just say from an agency perspective, responding to these big, lengthy RFPs is a lot. I mean, it's a heavy lift. And at the end of the day, I have found, generally speaking, that once you really dig into, because some of that functionality, it's not just the functionality of the platform. So we are going to, I'll just kind of highlight this too. We're going to send out a sample of what we consider to be a really good and comprehensive functionality matrix as our takeaway from this round of the process. But really, it is a lot more that the nuances are going to come out in these calls too, because one of the main things that we find that actually makes the difference for people ends up being support that the vendor provides, or honestly the relationships you have, the structure of how they set up their ongoing account management for your team, what kind of access you have to their help, and these types of things. And honestly, it's, when you boil down those RFPs, it really is like, is the functionality going to meet it? And is it the right team I want to work with the right parameters at the right price point? And so I find this is actually a nice way to get basically through the weeds of a laborious RFP process without having to, then sift through these like 50-page proposals back to you, because you're just kind of cutting to the chase and saying, what I really care about are these core components, the functionality, basically the working relationship I'm going to have with a team, and then some of those other nuances, support structure, again, account management structure, and then the pricing obviously comes into account. But I haven't ever really led somebody through an RFP process. Mostly, I'll just be biased, I don't like them from an agency perspective either, because I feel like it's overly laborious to get at basically the same critical pieces of information. And I find this gets at the heart of the matter faster, and it gets you into these conversations faster, which actually is where what do you call that? You separate the wheat from the chaff. Like you get at the like, oh, these are the ones that are going to stand out right away, versus when you look at all these proposals that have been put together for it, it's just, I find a little bit too much to get at it. But I'm also happy to have somebody argue against that and really loves the RFP process. But from the one that puts together these, it's just so much work. At the end of the day, I really just want to have a conversation and start a relationship with the folks that we're going to have as a client, rather than have to like put all this stuff together. But it's a good question. And I know that there are other shops that do this in a much more formalized way, but these are the things. It's kind of like we're doing a little bit of almost like a DIY too, where we go, you could do a lot of this on your own. And you could get at the heart of the matter a fair amount with yourself or with a guide without having to do that big, very expensive, laborious RFP process and still find your way to the right platforms. Hope that answered your question.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jen. And apologies to everybody. I didn't realize I could mute myself, and you probably heard some kids, neighbors' kids in the background. Sorry.
Not at all. Not at all. Thanks, Liz. Great to hear you. And thanks for tuning in. So really at this point, you are hopefully, again, your due diligence, this does require, again, either your own due diligence, like I said, or, obviously there are several teams that can help you guide you through this process. So through the due diligence and the returning of at least the requirements matrix. And again, it's more than the just the functionality of the platform. It's again, this larger, like, what's it going to be like, living in these tools. And so you are trying to get at some of that in the matrix. It's the administrative support relationship side of the equation, because you are going to have a relationship with the folks that run this platform for probably several years. So it's good to really get into the weeds too with them and see how well you like, and the rapport is built sooner rather than later. So you've got your fewer platforms, and then you go a little deeper. Again, and really at that high level, you don't also want to waste anybody's time if there's just core functionality you can't live without. So then you kind of say, okay, great. They can be awesome, lovely people, which they all are, but we just aren't a good fit on the functional level. So then another thing, obviously, so now you're getting ready, you're going in deeper. You've gotten these matrices back. You kind of know at a high level, these seem like the right fit. Hopefully it's 3 or 4. I have seen people do, 5 or 6 still even at this stage of the game. It's just know that that's just more time, to get through it and continue to whittle and cull and narrow down that list. So now you're going to send them the demo script and those use cases that you've kind of put together originally. And the key thing here is it's a little bit of an art and a little bit of a science. Like, you don't want to do the calls like 4 in one day, because you're going to be like, I have no idea what I just looked at. At the end of that day, all the tools will blur and you'll be like, wait, who did what now? But you don't want to have them like 2 weeks apart, ideally, if you can help it, because then you're like, I don't really remember what happened in that first call so much. And obviously always record them, number one. And then the last point here, always have somebody who is sort of driving that call, has the requirements up, has the script that they're supposed to follow, has those highlights up, what are the points you're supposed to touch on, so that you're also helping. Sometimes the demos go off down a rabbit hole and you say, we've only got an hour. Come on back, come out of that rabbit hole, yank them out of the hole, bring them back, say, okay, let's get back on task and back on the script here. And then taking, somewhat detailed notes, again, as best you can while you're trying to pay attention, so that you can go back to the notes and don't have to sit through the whole demo all over again. Or you can say, that's a fun fact, or a fun way to do it is to say, at such and such time, we talked about blah, 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 if you're the person taking notes, so that if you have that whole recording, people can just fast forward to the 27-minute point and say, okay, great, this is where we went deeper on the user, the part of the CRM where we're going into the user record or something like that, so that you can kind of just give the users and yourself notes for later if you need to come back and look at those recordings, to put little timestamps for yourself in your notes. That's a little tips and tricks moment there that helps. I might have sat through a lot of the recordings, and it's really helpful when you have those little tidbits to help you focus in on the right areas of those later on. So you want to keep them, probably every couple days, try to get through them if you can. So there's a little bit of time, and then there's a little bit of, you're not dragging them on forever. The biggest thing you can do, the biggest favor you can do already, schedule time after each call, or pretty quickly. Either if you have a demo and later that day, or at the very latest the next day, but pretty quickly after those initial calls, debrief with your team. Hold at least 30 minutes after those and sit down and have your own list. This is just a couple things to think about, but create your own list. Did they cover the high items? How well did they approach our hit list? How difficult does it seem? Does the UI clean? Do I love the people? Whatever you're like, you want to come back. So then those debriefs aren't also like, gosh, I don't know, I liked it. Great. Like, try to be more specific for yourself ahead of time. Like, what are we going to hope to cover in those debriefs, so we can go, you're basically scoring it. So you can make it as formal as a scoring, or you can leave it as just a conversation. It depends on how much work you want to, put your team through, but you can score each tool after you watch those demos, or if you're really on it, you can send everybody those things and they can be kind of keeping track through the call. Yes, they covered all the things, they scored really well. That just helps you be less subjective and more objective. So when you're going through these, and honestly, when you come down to actually selecting, it is a little bit of objectivity and subjectivity. So it's a combo, but take specific notes while it's still fresh, and then figure out, after you've gotten through all those first rounds, who's going to make it, because there's almost inevitably a round 2. Even if you've kind of narrowed it down to 1, you almost typically have another one just to go deeper, usually in like a specific area. I don't know that we got everything we needed to know out of this use case. I don't know that I saw everything I needed in this area of functionality. Can we go deeper on this? just for ease of mind. Again, even if you've only got kind of one winner at the end here, you might still want to do another round just to make sure that you're like, yes, they did cover everything I thought they did. So you get through. Sometimes people, I recommend at least 2 rounds of those demos. Sometimes they can go, again, if you start with 5 or 6, at that point, you might find yourself into 3 or 4 rounds of demos to really narrow down to that final tool. And that can, again, take a bit of time. I tend to put like an estimate out there that typically says, again, my guidelines are like, maybe you spend to 10 and then you narrow it down to 4 and then you've got 2. So that by the time you get into the second or third round of demos, you're really just trying to differentiate between those 2 finalists. And then you're able to make a choice. But then sometimes there isn't like that, like, boom, they totally crushed it. There's no question. And you're kind of stuck. There's those 2. God willing, there isn't 3, at the end that could kind of all do the things that you're kind of hoping a new platform will do. If it's functionality wise, there isn't a clear winner. I'm guessing that there are some of these other sort of some tangible, some less tangible. How well did you get along with the team? Do you really love the support offerings? Do you not like them? You get down in the weeds. I don't love the contract terms. Is it pricing? Careful, I always say careful selecting on price, because it is still true. You get what you pay for, almost still all the way down to the tools. And price alone can potentially push you in a direction that you won't be happy with. The other major factor that I haven't really touched on yet is just, if you're thinking about it today, what's going to solve my pain points today? That's good. But really be careful about taking into consideration what's happening down the road. As far in the future as you can kind of guesstimate, where is my organization heading? What are we trying to do? Are we trying to build this really amazing interactive digital experience? Awesome. I should go ahead and just splurge for that, more expensive tool because it has a functionality. I might not use it today, but we have already got a plan in place to get there in year 2, year 3. Don't make yourself move to another platform in 2 years. It may feel like, oh, but I really don't need all that functionality today. But if you have a plan in place already to get there within a year or 2, it's worth getting in, moving in, and becoming comfortable with the functionality in a platform that you use today, knowing that very easily you can expand the use of that existing platform so you're not finding yourself in the same cycle again in 2 years. Really try to be as forward thinking as you can, so you don't just go, we can't afford it, we can't do it, and you cut yourself short only to find yourself in this cycle again pretty quickly. So then the last critical piece, it's not just about your experience and not about what the platform folks are going to tell you. It's about users. Call references. Talk to people who use the platform. And these are some questions you might want to ask. There's some other things you can come up with, I'm sure, that will really help you gauge. The biggest thing I can say about who to call is try to find an organization that's somewhat similarly situated as yours. Because if you're Animal Hospital of, West Boho, and then you're talking to the ASPCA, no, like they're going to tell you things that are completely not relevant to your user experience. So try to find another team that's using it kind of like you want to use it, similarly sized, maybe has some of the same types of, they don't have to have the same vertical, obviously, but like they're trying to do the same types of things in the platform with about the same size team. To the best of your knowledge, really press on your hopeful selected new partner to give you references that are similarly situated, same type of users, use cases. So those folks that are using that platform can speak to, oh my God, I wish I would have known X. Oh, we've gotten in here and I didn't even know we were going to do this. And we use this thing all the time and it's amazing. Or gosh, I thought we had X and I thought we talked about it, but turns out when we got in here, it didn't do it the way I thought it was going to do it. There's always those stories. And really just the biggest picture, overall, how do people love the tool or like the tool or use the tool? Because newsflash, no platform is perfect. You're never going to find yourself in that perfect scenario where, oh my God, it's like unicorns and rainbows all day long. There's always going to be something. There's going to be, parts of the tool that don't work exactly like you like, but like make sure that when you're talking to those references, their overall experience with the platform is generally positive. It's doing the things that you're hoping it can do. They've got some of those same boxes are checked, and you're like, great. And so it just reinforces, really, these reference calls hopefully are just reinforcing you're already chosen this platform, and they're just really kind of doubling down on what you already thought and knew through the demos. Then it comes down to be a boss when you are negotiating contracts. These are sometimes big companies, and you feel like maybe you're a little David against Goliath or something, but don't underestimate that you're paying them money for their tools. So press on things that don't feel good about the contract terms. Try to push back on some levels of the negotiations if they don't feel good. Definitely get attorneys involved. I'm not an attorney, but I play one on TV, and I negotiate contracts all the time. And it's important to have, I get to a certain point and I immediately call in legal counsel. Because it turns out I didn't go to law school, and I don't know some of the ins and outs and the nuances of a legal binding contract. Know all the ins and outs, and just don't sort of acquiesce any power in your negotiation. You might be able to move them in certain areas, you might not be able to move them in other areas, but don't feel like when you get handed a contract that you just have to go, okay, sign it, and don't have any power to move any of those things. In my experience, contracts are always somewhat negotiable. Certainly there are different pieces with different folks that are more immovable, but make sure you know what you need. Your legal team is prepped, and you know what your non-starters for you all. And not that you ever want to break up with your brand new boyfriend you're gonna get married to, but certainly understand your exit and understand who owns what. You need to know that it needs to be in there that you own all your data, that you're easily able to access your data, you're able to export your data. They're not going to share your data. They're not going to sell your data. Like all of those seem like no-brainers. Just make sure they're in there, and make sure you're looking for those pieces specifically. Call them out. And again, just really think about what you need as an organization to feel good about entering into a legally binding relationship with your new best friends. I don't want it to be all doomsday, but certainly make sure you're taking care of yourself, your organization, and your data and your constituents' data. That's probably one of the most important aspects of this. And certainly all the major players obviously out there have very strict, very careful, very good guidelines and safety procedures in place around the data. So don't assume that it's not there, but just definitely look for it and make sure that all those precautions are there and in place, and that you've checked through that with your legal counsel. And then it's time to pack the bags and get ready. So next time we're going to talk about moving. You've done all this, you found it, you went through all the dating sites, you found your amazing new match, and you're ready to get moving. So we'll talk about that in the next installment of the webinar. But so as a quick recap, we have preparing your why state. Remember, make sure that as you get to the end, you even go, did we solve our why? Always good to check that at the end. Did we do what we set out to do? Sometimes you get so lost and buried in the weeds of a project, you come back and go, God, we totally didn't even actually do what we set out to do. We did different things, but we added, and that why statement grew over time and it morphed and changed. But it's interesting to sometimes go back and look at what your original goal statements were for a project like this that can take several months. You're creating that matrix, you're sending it out, creating the demo scripts, finding the right tools is a big one. A lot of research goes into that. People to talk to, Googling sites to look at, narrowing and doing the demos, and then selecting that right platform, reference checks, and negotiating contracts. It's a lot, not gonna lie. I know that Liz asked a great question along the way. I'm certainly happy to pause, take a breath. I don't see anything else in the Q&A or the chat at the moment, but I'll just take a pause and a breath and see if anybody has anything else. No burning questions? Good. See, I answer all the questions ahead of time. That's what I like. I obviously love having a dialogue, but perfect. Thank you, John, for the feedback. Thank you. I'm glad it was great. So basically, that's what we've got for now. Again, there's a lot going on in this evaluation and selection phase. Next up, we will cover next Thursday, same time, same bat channel, migrating and onboarding into the new tools. You get to move in and find out if you can live with your new spouse. Do we actually like each other? Yes, we do. Amazing. And if you're tuning in and you haven't downloaded the guide, please stop by and we'll send the link right after this. It's part of this to download the guide and take a look at all the platforms we've got in there. A lot of great tools to consider as you're going through this process. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Appreciate your attendance today, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon. And look for that. We're going to send out that requirements matrix and the recording to this week's episode. So thanks everyone.